We've got your late July free agency and trade NHL update coming up. All right, Paul, this has been a big week in lots of action in the NHL. A few surprises, a few somewhat more expected moves taking place. So for this video, what we're going to do is we're going to go back and forth. Each of us will talk about one forward, one defenseman, and one goaltender with a remarkable trade action of some type, something significant about each one of those. So, Paul, why don't you start us off with one forward? And I think this is a pretty big one.
Well, as you know, I have made no bones about it. My Montreal Canadiens, I'm watching what they're doing, and I think they actually got a steal with the pickup that they did today. They were quite active, picking up Mike Hoffman. They got him for 3 years at $4.5 million. Now, here's a guy who gets between 25 and 30 goals a year consistently, and between 50 and 65 points a year. Doesn't matter where he is. Now, there is some controversy that comes with him, and Montreal's been doing a great job this week of getting themselves into that. But, all he does is score. So Montreal needed to fill some holes on the wing and get some additional scoring, and they did that with Mike Hoffman. Now, whether all that stuff that happened in Ottawa is a testament to Mike Hoffman's character or not, time will tell. I think that's all behind him, and I think he's just ready to play hockey. He is all offense. His defensive game isn't great, but I think it's a great pickup there. Now, on the flip side of that, they lost Phillip Danault today, which is a tough loss for them because he was their major shutdown guy. And the irony is he wanted, I believe it was $5 million over 6 years with Montreal, and Montreal balked at that, and so he said, I'm going to free agency, and he got 5.5 over 6 years with the LA Kings. So big loss there, that a hole they're going to have to fill in at center ice, because who's going to play against your Connor McDavids? Who's going to play against your Nate McKinnons and your Austin Matthews? Who's going to do that? Who's going to win the faceoffs? Nick Suzuki better figure out how to become a better faceoff man if he wants to take on a bigger role with this team. Now, Suzuki is the future, but face-offs were absolutely horrendous for him. So, big loss with the no, but a nice pickup with Mike Hoffman.
For my forward that I want to talk about for a minute here, Paul, is Taylor Hall. So, Hall was, as we know, he moved partway through the season, switched over from Buffalo to Boston partway through his past season. And things started going a little bit better for him, and his point production picked up. He seemed to fit better in with the system in Boston. And I think he made it pretty clear in the springtime, I believe, that he was hoping to stay in Boston. And sure enough, he was willing to take a pay cut to do that. Now, the thing that he's signed, I think it's about $2 million a year less that he'll be making in terms of a pay cut on his previous contract. Now, Paul, the thing that I find fascinating about his case is that, here you have a guy who, a little bit of a sad story here, a guy that was a 93 point guy in 2017, 2018. And, now he's, the wheels have kind of come off the bus for him. And in the Buffalo part of this past season for him, he had 2 goals in 37 games. And things just were not clicking for him. And, it's kind of a sad decline there. Obviously, like I say, things picked up a little bit in the latter part of the season with Boston, and things are maybe going back in the right direction for him. But I don't know what you think, but I don't think Taylor Hall is ever going to get back to fulfilling the promise of his early career. So, defenseman, who do you have up, Paul?
Well, I think, ironically, one of the teams that tends to be a little more frugal was making a big splash in the free agent pool today, and that was the Carolina Hurricanes. And I think they did a stroke of business picking up Ian Cole at $2.9 million for 1 year, and then picking up Tony Deangelo. Now, Tony Deangelo comes with a lot of controversy. He's very outspoken with his political views. He pro-Trump, which has a lot of the media upset with him. He had, when he was in junior, he had some problems with language violations and saying inappropriate things and slurs that violated the OHL codes of conduct. He had that big fight with Georgiev last year. He's a bit of a hothead, and his temper gets the best of him. Now, I have heard from other people to say that he is actually good in the room. It's just when he's on the ice and he's competing, he can turn into a bit of an idiot. So, at $1 million, a fresh start, for Carolina to take that risk, I think in the market that he's in, it doesn't matter what his past is as much. And I think this will be a good move for both him and the team. And if it doesn't work out, they can walk away. Now, Ian Cole, he's a warrior. He's a great defenseman. Depends on how banged up he is, but he is a guy that is a winner and is a great team guy. So I really like the pickup there. So I think they did a great job picking up defensemen.
Okay. All right, and for the defenseman I'm going to talk about, this is going to be a 2-for-1 deal here. I'm going to talk about one trade there, one acquisition was made, but I'm going to predict another one coming up shortly. So Dougie Hamilton going to the New Jersey Devils for just a crazy sum of money. I think it was $60 million over 7 years. For a defenseman who, absolutely is a solid defenseman, and don't want to take anything away from Dougie Hamilton in terms of whether he might deserve that kind of salary. Let's leave out whether you can afford to pay somebody on the blue line that kind of money. Let's leave out the question about whether he individually is worth it or not. Okay, so Paul, we're going to set those two things aside. The question I want to ask is this the right fit for the New Jersey Devils when this team was already, before you were looking at getting another, like a $60 million defenseman, you already had PK Subban as the number one, great defenseman there, but he's the number one guy on the New Jersey Devils payroll. New Jersey has the highest percentage allocation in the NHL. They're the only team in the NHL this past year that was over 40% of their salary was allocated to the defense. Nobody else topped the 40% mark. And then on top of that, you've got this $60 million contract you're handing over to Dougie Hamilton. So I don't know if it makes sense or not from the imbalance point of view. And Paul, what I was saying about the prediction, I think it is so much out of alignment with what makes sense. I think those early season rumors that we were hearing, just a few people are rumoring out of New Jersey that maybe in this offseason that there would be that PK Subban might be on the trading block. I think that might be happening more actively than what we might know already. I don't see how you can possibly justify two $8-9 million defensemen on the same team. Otherwise, I think Subban's probably going to be going. And if he does end up going, then the question is, it's Hamilton in for Subban out. And then it's a different kind of metric that you're trying to assess here on whether this was a good move or not, and whether this all makes sense or not. Okay, on to the goaltenders now.
All right, so there just came across the wire. Philip Grubauer signing with Seattle is a huge one. I think they gave him $5.9 million over six years, something like that. But the one that I find the most quizzical would be, again, back to New Jersey. They went out and brought in Jonathan Bernier from Detroit to fill their goaltending void. That has been one area they have struggled in. But they gave Jonathan Bernier 2 years, and I believe it was $4.3 million per, something like that, a little over north of $4 million a year. When Braden Holtby is sitting there at a 1-year deal, goes to Dallas for $2 million. Is Jonathan Bernier that much better that you wouldn't want a guy that's actually been there and has won and has consistently been a 30-game winner? Or do you want a guy that was playing in Detroit? The reason he ended up in Detroit is because nobody else wanted him. So, it doesn't make any sense to me why. Jonathan Bernier is a fine goalie, but I think they overpaid dramatically for him. So, my mind, I don't know what New Jersey's doing, but it'll be interesting to see.
All right, so Freddie Andersen out in Toronto. Petr Mrazek coming up from Carolina. And Freddie Andersen going down to Carolina, presumably. So here are my thoughts on that. When you look at that from a multiple standpoint, perspective, most of it makes a lot of sense. Does it make sense for Andersen? Well, with kind of sad on how it's ended in Toronto for him. You've got the injury that last year that effectively handed a lot of ice time over to Jack Campbell, and Jack Campbell did such a solid job that he earned that first spot. So he's now the guy in Toronto, and I don't see that there's enough room in Dodge for both Andersen and Campbell. And with how Campbell has stepped up last year, I don't think that left enough time, enough space in town, enough space on the Toronto bench for both of them. And Andersen hasn't been a guy to split ice time, and hasn't, he's kind of seen as that number one guy. Mrazek, meanwhile, coming up from Carolina to Toronto, he has been used to splitting ice time for at least, large parts of his career. So the idea of him, splitting duties with Campbell and net, Mrazek's, pretty solid. And I think it makes sense from Mrazek's point of view. I think it makes sense from Toronto's point of view. I think Andersen, that he would want to, get a start in another location where he would be the lead guy. That makes sense. I think all these pieces are making sense. The one part I don't get is why Carolina, why they would want to get to, Andersen rather than Mrazek as their lead guy. I mean, Mrazek, I know, he's not a top level goaltender, but I don't know if necessarily Andersen, who has been injury prone and who's had slowly declining numbers over the last couple years, I'm not convinced that this was the right move for Carolina in this entire equation. What do you think there, Paul?
Well, I'm not a big Freddie Andersen fan. He always seemed sour when he was in Toronto. He never seemed happy. He was playing on a great team, and yet he was always kind of glowery and not happy. And he seems to be a guy that just can't play through any adversity at all. As soon as he gets the least bit injured, his game falls apart. And it's hard to knock him because he's had great career statistics, and he is a tremendous goalie. But I think he priced himself out of the market in Toronto, and I think both teams are at about the same level. Unfortunately, Toronto has kind of painted themselves into a corner with the cap issue. They were putting their future in terms of the salary cap's going to keep growing, so therefore we can keep spending money. And now with this flat cap, they need a forward, they need a rugged defenseman, and they need a goalie. And so Mrazek happened to be the best fit for what they could afford. And I guess you're making the assumption that Jack Campbell can step up.
Yeah.
Is Freddie Andersen probably better than Jack Campbell? Yeah. But Campbell was admirable. I think Toronto's in for a major setback this year coming because they're filling in with role players and trying to fill in these gaps with lesser lights and hoping the big four can pick it up. So it'll be really interesting in Leafs Nation to see where this goes. I think Toronto was planning to use the cap to his advantage, and with the assumption that the cap was going to continue to grow when they signed all these players to big money. And now that we're in a flat cap world, it really puts them in a bind. They're trying to fill in holes that with lesser light players and hoping the big four can step up and take over. Whether that can happen remains to be seen. I think this team took a significant step backwards. I think Carolina took a step forward. So it'll be interesting to see where this goes in Leafs Nation next year. We'll see.
All right, there you go. Some great, some interesting moves. Some teams came out with some impressive gains, but I don't know if everyone did. It's too bad we're out of time here because I would have loved to talk about the Alex Ovechkin extension and re-signing. I think that's an interesting one as well. But our video now is getting up. It's about 20 minutes long, so I think we better call it here and come back to it next time. So thank you very much, everyone, for watching. Be sure to give us a big like and subscribe below if you've enjoyed this video, and you can check out our website, and we'll put a link to that in the description below. All right, so thanks for watching, and have a good night.